Today I finished reading Trieste by Daša Drndić. This is a historical novel. Oh, I should note, translated from the Croatian by Ellen Elias Bursac, who translated one of the most recent books I talked about on here. I always try to make note of who the translator is. Yeah, translated from the Croatian by Ellen Elias Bursac. So, this is a historical novel, but usually historical novel means just like a novel that takes place in a historical setting, maybe has some historical figures as characters, but this book really blends the form of the novel and the form of the history book. It's like we have a fictional narrative um in a historical context, but then we have interspersed with that, there will be passages or even sometimes a whole chapter that are just informational text about that historical setting, which is really interesting. Sometimes I almost kind of DIY that, where like if I'm reading a novel that takes place in a region or a historical time period that I'm not super familiar with, I'll try to find like a history book or at least like a couple of Wikipedia articles about that time or that region that I can read alongside the novel and kind of give myself some context. But Dasha Drndić has done that for me in this book, um, which is really interesting. I really appreciated that format, although I imagine it's probably not for everybody. A lot of people probably would find that kind of tough to get through, kind of boring at times. But if you're someone like me who can read a history book for fun, this might be the novel for you. But as far as the like more details about what the book is actually about, this book takes place actually mostly not in Trieste, but in the nearby smaller city of Gorizia. Um, and it's referred to by several names throughout the book because there's the Italian name Gorizia, there's the German name for the city, which is Görz, and then there's the name in I believe both Slovenian and Croatian is Gorica, um, one less syllable than the Italian name. Uh, and there are people of all of those ethnicities who live in the city, and there are also many Jewish people who live in the city prior to the Holocaust. There are some Jewish people still in the city today, but far fewer. And this book is about a family of Jews in the region. Uh, and they so the what was I gonna say? So the Jewish family that this book follows, it kind of culminates in this woman who I think is kind of the narrator. It's narrated in third person for the most part. And then the final two chapters are actually narrated in first person by her son. So it might be that the whole book is actually his thoughts and memories about his mom and her family, but it seemed to me as I was going through it that the framing device is this woman's thoughts and memories. The woman is named Haya Tedeschi, and there's actually a family tree at the front of the book. So Haya is kind of the main character. Um, on her father's side, she's descended from assimilated Italian Jews, so they're of Jewish descent, but they're Catholic and they think of themselves as more Italian than Jewish. And then on her mother's side, there are German Jews and Slovenian Jews, and her mother's side were not converted to Catholicism in the time of her grandparents. But then I believe her mother did end up converting. Most of her family um, ends up converting to Catholicism if they weren't already from the converted side of the family during the 1930s, because Italy is collaborating with Germany by that time, and they are um, starting to arrest Italian Jews and send them to concentration camps. So this book follows a family of Jews who have converted to Catholicism, and they make it through. They never get sent to the camps. And it doesn't seem like they're even really aware of how bad things are for the Jews who did get arrested. Um, And part of what Haya is struggling with throughout her life is the fact that all of this was going on around her and she didn't even know about it. She didn't do anything to try to stop it. Obviously, it would have been very dangerous for her to try to speak out or anything, but she didn't even really know what was going on. So that's something she struggles with, maybe some survivor's guilt there. Um, but in fact, she even during the war has an affair with an officer of the SS. And that's one of the major plot points of the book, because the affair results in a child, and this SS officer, shortly after the child is born, he's like, "Hey, by the way, I knew you were Jewish the whole time." Um, again, they've converted to Catholicism, and that's kind of what keeps them safe, but they have a surname, Tedeschi, that everybody knows is a Jewish name. It's actually the Italian word for German, but I assume it must just be like a surname for Italian Jews whose ancestors lived in Germany at some point, like maybe shortly before people started having surnames in like the Middle Ages or whatever. Uh, but yeah, so he's like, by the way, I knew you were Jewish the whole time, and I'm engaged to a German woman back in Germany, and I'm getting transferred there soon, so never talk to me again. And she's obviously very upset about that. And then not long after that, her infant son disappears. And so much of the book, later in her life, is about her trying to find her son. And then, so this is technically kind of a spoiler, but it's on the back of the book, I'm pretty sure. Um, is that her son was actually, wait, is it on the back of the book? Yeah, yeah, it's on the back of the book, so I don't know if it counts as a spoiler, but her son was kidnapped by the SS as part of the Lebensborn program, which was like a Nazi breeding program where it involved a lot of different things. They had these like maternity centers where wives of SS officers could get like help with birthing and childcare, but then it also ended up involving a lot of orphanages because a lot of women, if they had a child born out of wedlock that they didn't want to keep, but they were considered sufficiently Aryan and the father was sufficiently Aryan, then they could kind of escape some of the social consequences of this child out of wedlock by giving up the child to the Lebensborn Project. And then it also involved um, children from places like Poland and Slovenia who were considered to have Aryan features, would get kidnapped and then sent into these orphanages and then placed with an Aryan family to raise them. So this was a whole program, and this is part of the book that is like real historical fact. This program existed, um, but yeah. So her son was kidnapped as part of that program because they knew, although she was Jewish, they knew that the father was an SS officer, so they took him, and then the final two chapters of the book are narrated by him as he prepares to go and meet his mother for the first time since he was like a couple months old. So all of that is the plot in terms of our fictional characters. But again, all of this is interspersed with informational text about the real history of um, Trieste and Gorizia, but also like Italy as a whole and Austria, during World War II and during the Holocaust. Um, one other thing I'll mention about the fictional narrative is Haya Tedeschi's family during the war. Again, they're not arrested, or like ever like officially labeled as Jewish because they've converted to Catholicism. Um, but they do become war refugees just because of fighting that's going on around Gorizia and Trieste during the Second World War. And so they live in Naples for a while. And then shortly after Italy conquers Albania, they go and live in Albania for a while. And then, like, right after Albania is starting to be liberated from Italian control, they're able to move back to Gorizia. So that was kind of interesting to see this, like, the different parts of the Italian Empire during World War II. Um, but yeah, so then it's interspersed with all this informational stuff, and then there's also a lot of interviews. Um, and some of them are presented as like an interview at a war crimes tribunal, but as far as I'm aware, all these interviews are like imagined, like invented by the author, um, and they're interviews with like Nazis and war criminals and SS officers, and then also interviews with victims. And some of them even say like, "Oh, how old are you?" And then the person will reply, "I'm dead." So these are not like actual interviews that happened, but they're describing real events around the Holocaust. So I mean, it's a very bleak book. Um, the format kept me very engaged though. Uh, it's also just like to explore this topic not through the eyes of a victim of the Holocaust, but through the eyes of someone who like didn't even realize it was going on until it was over, despite the fact that she and her family were of Jewish descent, is just like there's something very eerie and honestly terrifying about that. Um, so yeah, I trying to cat cat cameo. You gonna make an appearance? What a time to do it while I was in the middle of talking about all that. You gonna jump up? No? Okay, maybe not. Um, oh, there she is. Okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, it's structurally and thematically a challenging book. But I can't really say I enjoyed it because of the subject matter, but I am glad that I read it. I think I got a lot of value out of reading it. Um, Yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about what the Holocaust or World War II looked like in Italy. I've read a lot of stuff about, not a lot, but a decent amount about what it all looked like in Germany and in Poland, but I never really read anything about Italy. Um, Sorry, the other cat's making noise now. Uh, but yeah, the author is passed away now. Daša Drndić. She passed away a few years ago. She does have, I think, three or four other books in English that I might be looking into. I think this is the only one about this topic. I think most of her other books take place closer to her own country, which is Croatia. But there are a lot of Croatians who live in the Trieste area. More Slovenes than Croatians, but there are Croatians there. And there are Germans and Austrians, and there are Italians. It's a very multicultural region. It was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire prior to World War One. I think it's after World War One that it becomes a part of Italy. And then, if I'm not mistaken, the Yugoslav partisans take it from Italy during World War II, like after liberating their own country. And I would have to read more about this because this is not really a topic in the book. But as far as I understand it, I think it's like there was some people who wanted it to be part of Yugoslavia because of the Slovenian and Croatian populations in there. Um, but it ended up being just like an international free city for a few years, and then ultimately it was given to Italy, and it's part of Italy to this day. Although some of the surrounding countryside was given either to Slovenia or to Croatia. Um, I think the Pula area, Pula is another city nearby, was given to Croatia, and the peninsula that it sits on, which I think is called Istria, that became part of Croatia, and then an area like northeast of Trieste was given to Slovenia. But Trieste itself and the area kind of northwest of Trieste, including Gorica, um, was Italian, or was given to Italy. But I think the populations in all those regions are a mixture of Italian and German and Austrian and Slovenian and Croatian. It's a really interesting city. I would like to go there someday. Interesting that it was chosen for the title though, because again, most of the book is not in Trieste. Most of the book is in Gorica, or Gorizia, the Italian name. So I don't know why that was chosen. It's not the original title. The original title of the Croatian edition is actually a German word, Sonnenschein, uh, which that's in, sorry, cats are fighting. That's interesting too, because so Sonnenschein is the nickname of, I believe he was an Italian Jewish businessman in the Trieste region who's like very briefly mentioned somewhere early on in the book. I should have made a note of that. I'm pretty sure he was Jewish. I don't know. I can't find it now, but I think that's interesting though because it's also towards the end of the book they frequently mention um, Sonnenstein as the name of a location that was associated with the Lebensborn program, Sonnenstein Castle. Um, but yeah, so Sonnenschein means sunshine, as you may have guessed, and then Sonnenstein would literally mean sunstone, but it's the name of a castle that was used by the Nazis. Oh, sorry, not the Lebensborn program. It was actually part of the persecution and extermination of disabled people early on in the Nazi regime. So yeah, I assume that's probably it's probably intentional that those two terms are similar, and then that was chosen for the title. But then I don't know why the title was Sonnenschein and not Sonnenstein, because the Sonnenschein guy is only mentioned like once. It's really, yeah, seems kind of random. Um, I'm gonna try to flip through. What was this guy's name? You know what? Um, I'll try to talk as I'm doing this so I don't have to like edit out a bunch of silence of me just scrolling through something. But yeah, so really interesting format, but not for everybody. I really enjoyed it though. The enjoyed the format, obviously very bleak subject matter. Um, but yeah, I it's a difficult book in a lot of ways, and it leaves you with not a great outlook of humanity. I mean, as any literature about the Holocaust would. Just this horror that human beings were able to inflict this on each other, and that so many people just kind of watched it happen, or maybe even didn't realize it was happening and that it was that bad. Um, yeah, so it's very well written though. I'll also say that in praise of both the author and the translator, there's moments of very beautiful prose and yeah, I mean, yeah. Sorry, I don't have anything else to say. I'm just trying to find the Zone and Shine guy. What is? All right, we're gonna find it. Ricardo Ely. That's his name. Ricardo Ely. Okay, so I'm gonna Google this guy now, which I did as I was reading, but I don't remember. Ricardo Ely is an Italian businessman and former politician. He's from Trieste. Um, oh, not Jewish. He is a Waldensian. You don't hear about those very often. That's a really obscure medieval Christian heresy. That's really random. Um, because that wasn't an Italian thing. I think they were in France. But yeah, it's actually his father or grandfather who's mentioned in the book briefly, and also had the nickname Sonnenschein. Um, Yeah, so I don't know why that's the title. I really don't understand how that became the title of the book, other than the fact that it also kind of sounds like Sonnenstein, which is the Nazi castle that's mentioned later in the book. I don't know. Weird little thing. But then in English, it's called Trieste, even though it actually takes place in Gorizia. So I don't know. Who knows? Book titles are kind of arbitrary sometimes, but I do recommend the book. I'll probably read more by Daša Drndić in the future. Um, Definitely going to read more from this translator as I continue to read more um, South Slavic literature. And yeah, speaking of South Slavic literature, I think the next thing I'm going to read is The Cyclist Conspiracy by Svetislav Basara. That one is translated from Serbian, not by Ellen Elias Bursac, different translator, but yeah. So, and that one's not too long, so I'll probably be back in, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks.